You have come here at the right time because we're doing something a little spontaneous. We're doing an enrichment feed. So this is not a feeding that's going to be on your schedule or program guide. So this is just something that occasionally we'll do spontaneously throughout the day. So enrichment is a term that means anything that stimulates our otters mentally or physically. Basically, that anything that gets them to think or exercise. So occasionally we will do enrichment feeds for them, and we will deliver their food to them in new and exciting ways. And sometimes if we notice they weren't too hungry in the mornings, we might do an enrichment feed a little bit later, just in case they started getting hungry and they want a little more food. So that's what we're seeing today. You might see some funky things entering into the exhibit. So this is all for enrichment. So looks like we have a pile of ice on the deck there. So we'll often feed our otters on exhibit some ice. So it looks like we've got Rosa. She is stationing right in front of the deck here. So let's go ahead and introduce the otters we have on exhibit. We've got Rosa and Ivy. So we want to give Rosa a little extra attention. She is the otter directly in front of the deck right now. And Ivy was taken behind the scenes because we want to give Rosa a little more attention right now, a little extra care. So we're seeing if she wants to eat anything extra than she did this morning, seeing if she's hungry again. So you might see our trainers going over to her and seeing if she'll eat anything else. And now let me talk about that pile of ice. So I mentioned that was for enrichment. So inside this exhibit, our otters are mainly eating squid, shrimp, and clam tongue. It's a very squishy, soft food diet. But out in the wild, they're actually eating hard-shelled animals, really crunchy things like crab and sea urchin. They have special adaptations that allow them to hunt those animals and crack into those hard shells. So sea otters have incredibly powerful jaws, and they're also tool users. So they're known for using a rock or something else really hard to use to bang against their food to crack into those hard shells. So we did used to feed them hard-shelled animals inside the exhibit. We quickly stopped though because we found out their favorite thing to use to crack into those hard shells is to bang their food against our beautiful, pristine windows that we have on exhibit here. So that's why they're getting fed a squishy, soft diet inside exhibit. But we will occasionally do enrichment for our otters so that they can still do that natural behavior. So we've got some ice out on the deck that they can crunch onto. So that adds that little crunchiness into their diet. So that satisfies that need for their powerful jaws. We can still work their jaws. And it's really cute to see them go after that ice. They really love munching on it. So occasionally they'll come out onto the deck and they will grab some ice. And you will almost not even notice it because they have really loose skin right underneath their armpits, kind of acts as pockets. So you almost don't even notice them grabbing the ice because they are immediately putting it in their pockets under their armpits and dipping back into the water. Super sneaky like. I love to watch them do this. And it also looks like we've got some other enrichment devices as well. We've got some little tunnels out there, some new things they can interact with. And that green stuff underneath that tunnel, we call that car wash kelp. So it's kind of in a kelp shape, but it's more of a car wash material that you'll see if you've ever been in a car wash. You'll see those little mats that clean your windows. That's kind of the material that it's similar to. So that's something that they can interact with. But all of these enrichment tools, these are just to get them to think creatively, new things that they can interact with inside their exhibit, just to keep their mind and body active. So I want to talk a little bit about the adaptations of our otters. In particular, the thing that makes them so cute is their fur coats. It's actually a super important fur coat. We are among some record breakers in the animal kingdom right now. So they have the densest fur coat in the entire animal kingdom. So for reference, the average human head has about 100,000 hairs on it. But for our southern sea otters, they have up to 1 million hairs just per square inch of their body. That's the size of a postage stamp or a Cheez-It for the kiddos. So those hairs in that fur coat are just incredibly densely packed together. And if we have any divers in the audience, they have such a dense fur coat that if they take a dip below the surface of their water, their skin doesn't even get wet. In fact, sea otters have to groom themselves for hours every single day, between 3 to 5 hours per day. Can you imagine brushing your hair that long? I think my arm would get tired. But they're not only keeping their fur coat clean, they are filling it with air bubbles, so it acts as their own personal dry suit, keeping them warm in these chilly waters. And you may think, well, why do our otters have to do that? Well, that's because the temperature of the water inside the exhibit is pretty much the same as it is in Monterey. And for those of you who have tried to go swimming in Monterey, it can get quite chilly here. So they still need those adaptations, and they still use those fur coats, even inside the exhibit, because it's the exact same water as is out in the bay. We pump it directly from the bay into all of our exhibits here. So I'm going to let y'all enjoy the rest of the enrichment feedings with me off microphone, but if you want to ask me any more questions about what's going on inside the exhibit, my name's Becca. I'm a naturalist here on staff, and I'm going to hang out on the upper level of this exhibit if you want to ask me any questions. And otherwise, if you're moving on, feel free to enjoy the rest of your visit at the Monterey Bay Aquarium.
Oldest sea otter, who is in fact the oldest known southern sea otter in the entire world, is Rosa. Rosa is 23, but in August, so tomorrow, she will be turning 24. Sometime in August, probably not exactly tomorrow. And right when the trainers come out, they're gonna do something called stationing. And that's where they all line up in a nice, neat line so that I can identify them. Just kidding, it's so that our trainers know exactly where the otters are, and so that the otters know what trainer they're working with. So they're all a little bunched up today, not doing that stationing super well. But the super blonde one on the left is Ivy. The one with the dark hair in the middle is gonna be Ruby, and the one on the far right is Rosa. Actually may have mixed up Rosa and Ivy. Rosa is on the left and Ivy is on the right. Now today, we're going to be doing a feeding and training session, and all of the training behaviors that we're gonna ask these otters to exhibit will be through a model of positive reinforcement. What that means is our trainers will ask our otters to exhibit a certain behavior, oftentimes to help take better care of our otters, or to make sure that they're looking healthy and happy. And if the otter does as the trainer asks, they're rewarded with a nice little piece of food. And if they don't do as the trainer asks, that's A-okay. At the end of the day, these otters are completely in charge, and whether or not they want to participate in the feeding is completely up to them. Some of the behaviors are also enrichment behaviors. These are any behaviors that they naturally would exhibit in the wild, like scanning for predators and stuff like that, that they don't have any reason to exhibit here. So making sure that we can reinforce all of those natural behaviors is incredibly important. Namely, because these gals are the teachers of the next generation of otters. Oh, and it looked like we have a little bit of target training there for Ruby in the center. So that little pole with a blue buoy on the end of it is a target. And they know if they bop that with their snout, they will get a reward. And usually that reward is either clam tongue, shrimp, or squid. This is very helpful training because it allows us to get our otters to go exactly where they need to go, making taking care of them a lot more stress-free for everyone involved, including the otters. Some of this training is desensitization training. It's where we use tools that might be used to help take better care of them behind the scenes on exhibit. Even though they're not getting that extra bit of care today, it just makes them more comfortable with it if we ever do need to use it in the future. Again, just reducing all stress for everyone involved. So, as I mentioned earlier, these gals are the teachers of the next generation of otters. So the way that our program works is when otter pups are stranded in the local surrounding waters, the Monterey Bay Aquarium gets a phone call. And we go out there and we try and reunite those pups with their mothers, but if we're unsuccessful, we'll bring them back here, where they're paired up with any one of these gals and taken behind the scenes. And over the course of 4 to 5 months, these gals will accept those pups as if they were their own and teach them how to swim and dive, to forage and feed, just like their mothers naturally would in the wild. And this is extremely important because otters have a lot to learn from their mothers. They're one of the most intelligent marine mammals, and they're the only one to exhibit tool use. In fact, they'll oftentimes tuck a little rock underneath their armpit. It's like their favorite rock, and they will use that to break open shellfish like urchins and crabs and clams, all that sort of stuff. We actually used to give these gals a lot of hard food, but not having any rocks to open up that hard-shelled food with here on exhibit. What did they break open those hard-shelled food items with but our nice, pristine glass windows? So we made the switch over to a mostly soft food diet, but they do get hard food here and there, in addition to other enrichment forms that allow them to practice breaking open shells using things like dog toys and stuff like that. But this surrogacy program has been incredible for wild otters because since those otter pups are being raised entirely by other otters instead of humans, at the end of the program, they're not habituated at all to human care and are completely releasable. All of these gals have spent a lot of time in human care and would not make it in the wild because they are so used to human care, they would have trouble finding food for themselves. So for that reason, they're all non-releasable, but the pups they raise are completely releasable, which is pretty incredible. The Monterey Bay Aquarium has raised and released more than 40 sea otter pups through this program. And Rosa, the star of our program on the far right there, has raised a record-breaking 15 sea otter pups. So she's a pretty incredible mom. You might notice these gals are eating a tremendous amount of food right now. And this is just feeding 1 out of 3. They have 2 more feedings to get through by the end of the day today. And that's because in the wild, a sea otter can eat up to 25% of its body weight every single day. To put that in human terms, if I ate 25% of my body weight every day, I would need to eat 400 hot dogs every day. That would be a lot of trips to Costco. But these gals are absolutely up for it. And when you translate those hot dogs into one of a sea otter's favorite foods, the sea urchin, it's what makes them something called a keystone species. You see, sea urchins prey on kelp, and if there are no otters around, the sea urchin population can explode and decimate entire kelp forests, creating something called an urchin barren. So simply, the presence of these otters, keeping those urchin populations in check, is going to make sure that we have super healthy kelp forests. So they are a keystone species because they help ensure that that ecosystem is around for everyone else. Helps make sure all those other organisms that rely on kelp as a habitat, as a place to forage and raise their young, can rely on that safely. So here in Monterey, that's part of why we have such healthy kelp forests and why we put so much effort into that surrogacy program, ensuring that these wild populations of otters can stay extremely healthy. In addition to eating all this food, another incredible adaptation these otters have is the densest fur in the entire animal kingdom. In fact, in just 1 square inch of otter fur, it's about the size of a Cheez-It, they can have up to 1 million hairs. That is more hair than on 10 people's heads combined, packed into just 1 square inch of otter fur. In fact, that fur is so dense that it traps a layer of air between them and the water, keeping them super warm, almost like they're wearing a dry suit, like a lot of divers might wear out here in Monterey. Unfortunately, though, that fur is also incredibly soft, and it made them a big target of the fur trade. In the 1700s and 1800s, sea otters were hunted to the brink of extinction. In fact, it was actually believed that our southern sea otters here in California were completely extinct. Luckily, though, in 1915, a group of hikers discovered a raft of otters off the coast of Big Sur. And thanks to the due diligence of local officials who put a lot of protections in place to safeguard that secret of that raft of otters and make sure that they had all the resources they needed, the otter population has been able to recover and now numbers over 3,000 in California. Now, that's not the numbers that it had historically, but it is a huge step in the right direction. It also just goes to show how when we give nature the time and attention that it deserves and needs, it can and will recover. And I think that this is incredibly inspiring. Thinking about all the different things happening in our environment today, we can look to the otters as a source of inspiration. And it also goes to show how civic-based change, like having people in elected positions who care about our environment and are going to put protections in place, can have a massive impact. Now, despite eating so much food today, and every single day, these otters remarkably only have 2% body fat. That is 1/3 of the body fat that a bodybuilder would have before going on competition. And part of the reason that they have such low body fat is pretty much all of that food is being converted into heat energy to make sure that they can stay warm in this really cold water. So they pretty much just burn all those calories throughout the day, every day, which makes it incredibly important for them to spend a lot of time feeding and diving. What's very interesting about this behavior, though, is that sea otters will oftentimes specialize in 1 or 2 specific food items. Although it's been observed they prey on over 100 different organisms, most otters will have a favorite food, just like humans. Some otters might love octopus, while other otters might love abalone. And it's been observed that a mother otter will actually teach those preferences to their babies, which is pretty remarkable. So then those pups will grow up and also love octopus or abalone or whatever. Now, that is just about all the information I have to share with you all here today. But if anyone has any questions, once again, my name is Max, and I'm standing in the center of the 2nd floor mezzanine, and I would love to talk otters with any of y'all. But for all of you who are moving on to other exhibits, please have an utterly fantastic day here at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. side right now, that looks like Ivy. Yes, that would be Ivy. And Ivy is the blondest of all of our otters. She has a lot of blonde hair on her head, as well as a lot of blonde hair on her chest. And that gal that just slowly swam over to now be on the far right side, that is Rosa. Rosa is the oldest of all of our otters. She has a bit more blonde hair than Ruby or Selka, but a bit less blonde hair than Ivy, who is the blondest. And Rosa is almost 24 years old, making her the oldest southern sea otter that is currently known. Now, it looks like we're just doing some pretty standard feeding right now, making sure each otter gets their fill, and they're receiving a mixture of clam tongue, shrimp, and squid. And so right now, one of our gals just came out onto the deck. I believe that was Ruby. And decking out is a really useful form of training where we get to practice asking the otters to go to a certain location or just get a better look at their paws, potentially their eyes and teeth as well. It serves as a way to do a quick medical checkup while also practicing and reinforcing an important training behavior. And there you might also see one of our trainers just pulled out a target right there. That stick with a little buoy on the end of it, and that is for target training. And that is a very specific way to get an otter's attention, getting them to hold still so that if there's any sort of care that needs to be administered to them, that they are very able to do that, and able and willing. And all of this training is done through a model of positive reinforcement, which means our trainers will ask our otters to exhibit a certain behavior. And if the otter does it, they'll be rewarded with a nice piece of food. Like I said earlier, usually squid, clam tongue, or shrimp. But if the otter does not want to participate in a training session, that's a-okay as well. It is completely up to these otters whether or not they want to do anything. And if they do it, they get rewarded. But if they don't, that is totally fine. All of these trainings, additionally, are used to help take care of these otters. There's two different kind of behaviors we typically do. We have husbandry behaviors like decking out, target training that you saw right there. That allows us to administer better care to them. But then we'll also ask them to exhibit natural behaviors as well. There, like that little spin right there, that was a natural behavior that you may have seen Rosa do just now. And those natural behaviors are very important because although these gals are not encountering predators or anything like this on exhibit, in the wild they absolutely would be. And since they're the teachers of the next generation of otters, it's very important that all of these behaviors are in ship-shop shape. You see, these gals are part of our one-of-a-kind sea otter surrogacy program. The way that it works is when otter pups are stranded in the surrounding waters, the Monterey Bay Aquarium gets a phone call, and we go out there and try and reunite those pups with their mothers. But if we're unsuccessful and we're not able to reunite that pup with their mother, we'll take them back to the aquarium where they're paired up with one of these incredible mothers. And these gals have raised more than 30 otter pups between all of them. And they will accept those babies as if they were their own, teaching them how to hunt and play, to forage and feed, just like they would naturally would in the wild. And since sea otters are very intelligent animals, there's a lot of teaching that needs to happen. In fact, they're the only marine mammal to exhibit tool use. Oftentimes in the wild, they'll have a favorite rock that they'll tuck underneath their armpit in a little pocket that they have, and they will use that rock to break open any hard-shelled crustaceans that they like to eat. Now, you may have noticed that today they're just getting an entirely soft food diet. And in the past, we actually did give them a lot of hard-shelled crustaceans, but not having any good rocks to break them open on, what did they break them open on but our nice, clean glass windows? So we opted to move them to a soft food diet. But we still do a lot of toy enrichment trainings where they get these toys that resemble dog toys to an extent, and they have to try and figure out how to get the food out of there, just like they naturally would with some sort of hard-shelled crustacean in the wild. Now, this is their first feeding today. First feeding of 3, though. And you might notice they're still eating quite a bit, even though they have 2 more meals for the rest of the day. And that is because otters can eat an incredible amount of food. Every single day, an otter can eat up to 25% of its body weight. If I ate 25% of my body weight every day, I would need to eat 400 hot dogs every day. That is a tremendous amount of food. I don't think I would be up for all those trips to Costco. But when you translate those hot dogs into one of a sea otter's favorite foods, the sea urchin, it's what makes them something called a keystone species. A keystone species is any sort of species that helps a whole ecosystem function and that a lot of other animals are going to rely on. And so by eating those urchins, they're keeping the urchin population stable, keeping it in check, which in turn helps keep kelp forests very healthy because urchins are one of the #1 predators of kelp. And so by supporting those kelp forests, that's a whole ecosystem that is benefiting, which then goes on to support countless other invertebrates, fish, and other marine mammals throughout their life cycles as an important place to find food or hide from predators. So simply just their presence here on the coast helps keep our kelp forests super healthy. And that kelp goes on to later then support our otters as well. Otters at night will oftentimes wrap themselves in kelp. They'll tie themselves off in kelp so that they stay put as they're sleeping out at sea. Unlike most marine mammals, or at least pinnipeds like seals and sea lions who will oftentimes come to shore to sleep, sea otters sleep, give birth, eat, do everything at sea. They are masters of the ocean. And another fun fact about them while they're sleeping, oftentimes when they're in these great big rafts of otters, which is what you call a big group of otters, they will hold hands with each other to make sure they don't drift apart, which is just the darndest thing in the whole world. Another incredible adaptation our otters have is the densest fur in the entire animal kingdom. And just 1 square inch of otter fur, it's about the size of a Cheez-It, they can have up to 1 million hairs. And that hair is so densely packed that they actually are barely getting wet when they're swimming. There's a layer of air trapped between them and on the water, almost like a dry suit. And that dense fur helps keep them extremely warm in these cold waters. I know a lot of people might be visiting from outside of California and think, oh, California has super warm waters. Maybe down in SoCal, but if anyone swam here in Monterey or San Francisco, you know just how cold it is. You would not want to get in there without a wetsuit. So that fur is extremely important for keeping them warm, especially since unlike other marine mammals, sea otters have almost no body fat. If you look at a seal, they are just covered in it. But a sea otter will oftentimes have around 2% body fat, a third of the body fat percentage of a bodybuilder right before competition. So that fur is incredibly important. Unfortunately, it is also incredibly soft, and it got them into quite a bit of trouble with the fur trade. And in the 1700s and 1800s, they were hunted to the brink of extinction. In fact, in California, we believed our southern sea otters, the subspecies we have here, was completely extinct. Luckily, though, in 1915, a group of hikers discovered a raft of just 50 otters off the coast of Big Sur. Thanks to the due diligence of local officials and politicians, those otters were protected, and a lot of work went into making sure that
some members of our animal care team who are here for a feeding and training session with a very special friend. Now, we currently have a sea otter on exhibit whose name is Rosa. Now, Rosa is our oldest otter here at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. She is 23 years old. Now, for context, female otters typically live upwards of 20 years. Now, Rosa is 23, so she is quite the incredible sea otter here at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. In fact, she is the oldest known living southern sea otter. So she is very special and very close to our hearts here at the aquarium. I know we've got a lot of Rosa fans around the world, so she is quite fun. Now, we are here to perform an enrichment with Rosa. Now, an enrichment is anything that both mentally and physically stimulates our otters. But I want to mention that these otters aren't just here for our own entertainment. They act as the starring roles in their own healthcare and welfare. So this enrichment session is a really great way to help her interact with objects and the exhibit and our animal care team in new and exciting ways. Now, this enrichment is really cool because out in the wild, otters typically munch on hard-shelled invertebrates. That's animals without a backbone. So think things like clams, crabs, sea urchins, things of that nature. But we learned if we give them hard shells here on exhibit, they will crack them against none other than those clear, pristine windows that you folks are currently looking through. So we had to learn how else to give them that yummy food and still enrich them the same. So that is where these objects that look a lot like dog toys come in. So we will stuff the yummy meat inside of those hard shells into these enrichment objects, and then it gives the otters that same sense of cracking into their food, getting into it to get that meat inside. But of course, it keeps the exhibit nice and pristine. So it's a win for us and a win for our otters as well. So you'll see my animal care team member is there on the right-hand side of the rockwork feeding her different enrichment toys so she can interact with them at her own pace and she can get to that yummy food. Now, of course, we are giving them hard shells behind the scenes. You also may have noticed that we originally had 4 sea otters on exhibit today. The other sea otters are actually behind the scenes doing some extra special feeding and training. So it is really the Rosa show today, which we're very excited about. You can get up close and personal with her here. Now, I also want to mention that otters typically they typically eat about 20 to 25% of their body weight every single day. That's the average human equivalent of us eating about 25 pizzas every day. Now, one of the reasons otters need to eat so much is to keep up a high metabolism in that chilly water. And that goes for our resident otters as well, because we filter about 1,500 gallons of raw seawater into our kelp forest exhibit every minute. That water then feeds everywhere else, including the water that Rosa is swimming through. So our otters need to make sure they're eating a lot to stay warm as well. And another way otters stay warm is by grooming their fur. Otters spend about 3 to 5 hours every day grooming their fur. Can you imagine brushing your hair for that amount of time? I think my arms would get a little bit tired. But otters don't have a layer of fat or blubber that some other animals do to help them stay warm. So to keep that coat healthy, otters spend about 3 to 5 hours, like I mentioned, every day grooming their fur. They have the densest fur coat in the entire animal kingdom, at up to 1 million hairs per square inch, which is about the size of a postage stamp. So, of course, our otters are eating a lot, they're grooming a lot, but some of our resident otters have a really important job. I mean, they all do, because they're inspiring conservation of the ocean. But some of our other otters are able to act as surrogate or foster moms for pups that we rescue from the wild. These pups have maybe been separated from their mom, maybe they've been injured, but some of our resident otters get to act as those surrogate moms for those pups, teaching them how to hunt, how to feed, how to groom, essentially how to be an otter. We've had quite a few success stories with this one-of-a-kind, groundbreaking surrogacy program, and one of the starring roles in that story is Rosa. Now, Rosa has since retired from our sea otter surrogacy program, seeing as she is 23 years old. We're letting her live out her retirement at the 5-star resort, also known as the Monterey Bay Aquarium. And I really mean 5-star resort, because we are giving our otters free food, free shelter, and yes, free health care. They are living the good life here with us, and we even feed them restaurant-grade, sustainable seafood. So the same type of seafood you might eat at the dinner table tonight is the same seafood that we are giving Rosa. So she's really living the good life here, getting her own personal training session. And it's really incredible to see her interacting with those objects. It's definitely very fun. Now, I want to mention that otters aren't just incredibly cute, they're also incredibly important out there in the wild as well, because sea otters are something called a keystone species, which means they help keep the health of the ocean ecosystem in balance. One of the ways they do this is simply by eating sea urchins. Now, sea urchins, they love to munch on kelp, and if they eat too much of it, they can become so abundant that entire kelp forests can literally disappear, leaving behind an urchin barren. And that's where sea otters come in. By keeping urchin populations in check, sea otters play a starring role in maintaining healthy kelp forests that are able to provide food and shelter for over 1,000 ocean critters that you and I know and love. So otters are pretty incredible, and I'm really lucky to be able to call them my coworkers. I'm a bit spoiled by that, and I'm so glad that you folks can enjoy them up close today as well. Now, you may be wondering how you can help out these furry friends. And these friends really need our help because historically the sea otter population was decimated down to about 50 sea otters, 50, due to the hunting of their fur coats in the 1800s. But then some folks decided that that wasn't okay. They wanted to preserve this species, especially them being a keystone species. And eventually some laws and legislation were put in place. And now we have upwards of 3,000 sea otters in what is now called the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. So this really goes to show that when you're passionate about something, you can get a group of friends together and make some real, lasting, impactful change, especially when it comes to such an important and iconic species. And that's where we all come in today. Because just by entering our doors, you're already helping us inspire conservation of the ocean and learn more about all of these incredible animals. And of course, I also encourage everyone, when you're going back to your communities, to search for groups that are advocating for change at a systems level, meaning advocating for laws and legislation like marine protected areas, and political leaders who are fighting to protect all of these incredible animals out there in the ocean. And like I mentioned, you folks are already helping us do that, so we really want to thank you so much for joining us here today. Now, it does look like our feeding and training session with Rosa is concluding here within the next few minutes. But once again, we want to thank you so much for joining us. If you have any other questions about
Well, hello again. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here at our Sea Otter exhibit. As we are now joined by 3 of our trainers here this morning, and we're going to do actually a very special feeding session for our otters today. So what you're now seeing being handed out right now is some really cool ice molds for some of our otters, or sometimes I like to call them some otter pops, where this is a big mold of ice, but inside of those ice molds, frozen inside, are some of their favorite foods. So for example, some squid, some shrimp, and some shelled clam. So they love really munching and crunching on that ice molds there, and it kind of serves like a little puzzle. So we encourage them to use their natural foraging skills and behaviors, just like our gal Ruby on that far left-hand side is showing you how she's trying to get that food out of those ice blocks. So we encourage them to use their natural foraging skills, foraging behaviors, so they can go ahead and keep up with those skills, just like how they would practice those in the wild. Now, this is something that's called an enrichment. And enrichment is something that we do for our otters every single day to provide some mental stimulation, some exercise as well, to kind of keep it fresh, keep it new, making sure all our gals are always stimulated and having some fun. Now, also, I would love to introduce to you the 3 gals that we do have on exhibit this morning. So starting on that far left-hand side, we are joined by Ruby and Ivy. Now, Ruby and Ivy on that left-hand side, how to tell the difference is the color of their fur on their heads, because that's really simple to spot them out. So Ruby, she's going to be the darker of the 2 in the water. She's our most chocolatey brown otter. And right next to her is Ivy. And Ivy, on the other hand, she is our blondest otter on exhibit, with that really bright blonde head and that really bright blonde chest. Now, she was napping on side of the deck, but she now has made her way into the water close to the middle there. That is Rosa. Now, Rosa, she does have a golden blonde head herself, and she's also our eldest otter at 23 years old, folks, doing absolutely amazing. She did have a full belly this morning from an earlier session before we opened, so maybe she's going to go ahead and max and relax, maybe take some naps as well, or also get some yummy treats that's getting handed to her with her trainer there. Now, folks, I did mention on the menu inside of those ice blocks are some of their favorite foods. The squid, the shrimp, the shelled clam. But you see, out in the wild, sea otters like to eat invertebrates, or animals that are encased in hard shells. So you can think of crabs and urchins and abalone. So with sea otters, what they like to do in the wild is that they will carry around their favorite rock, and they'll use that rock or another hard surface so they can bash open those shells and get into that nice, yummy, squishy center. Well, here, folks, on exhibit, we learn quickly, and we actually learn the hard way. Because at one point in time, we did give our otters food with shells on exhibit. But we learned very quickly that when we did, their favorite tool, their favorite hard surface to open up those shells were those clear, pristine windows you're looking through right now. So our gals, they were scratching up the windows a little bit, so to make sure we can keep those windows nice and clean so you can all keep getting amazing views, we'll now give them the soft, squishy food on exhibit, and then we'll frequently give them the hard-shelled food behind the scenes. But then that's another reason why these ice blocks kind of really come into play. It kind of simulates that hard shell, the munching and crunching. So they really do enjoy crunching on those molds. And that's why you'll notice also on top of the deck next to our trainers, there's also piles of ice as well. So they do love crunching on that ice, just like how they would crunch into their shells. So they really satisfy their little crunchy factor. So how we enjoy a bag of chips or a bowl of popcorn, they really love going at it. Now, it looks like our trainers are now holding out and also passing out some more ice molds, but you'll notice those are different in color, right? So those are clam juice molds. So essentially an ice cube that is frozen clam juice, which is a very big fan favorite of our gals. Now, folks, not only do they love the treats that they're receiving, the food inside these ice molds, but they have to eat
her career here at the aquarium, she has helped us successfully raise 15 pups in total. So well done, Rosa. Now we see Ivy's being asked to come out of the water and onto the deck there. And that's a good area we like to have the otters go, so our trainers get a good look at their body outside of the water. Now you can see she's being asked to step up on.
stimulated throughout their time here at the aquarium. And you can see one of our care team members stepped out to offer some food here as well. Remember, Rosa was napping, so we want to make sure she gets a chance for some food too. So we're going to have a lot of wonderful interactions here, showing off how each of our otters are able to get their food.